Happy Friday, everybody. First video of the new year. So today I want to talk about uh, employees versus independent contractors. So, just as a quick summary, independent contractors are better for the business owner and for the employee contractor relationship. Both parties save taxes by treating somebody as an independent contractor, but there are some restrictions. So, real quick, I just kind of wanted to go over why there's a benefit. So, let's say you're paying somebody $65,000 a year. If you pay them as a W-2, you're going to have you're going to owe Medicare and Social Security tax on them. Well, the rate is 15.3%. And when somebody works for you as an actual W-2 employee, you pay half of their payroll taxes for them as an expense to you, and then you withhold the other half of the payroll taxes from their paycheck. So the employee pays half, you pay half, but in cash flow, it feels like you're paying the full 15.3% yourself as the business owner. But just to kind of talk about it and give some numbers. So if you're paying somebody $65,000 in wages, you're going to pay, oh, what was it? Half of 15.3, which is 7.65%. So 7.65%, you're going to pay approximately $4,972 in payroll taxes for them throughout the year. And then they're going to have that same amount of 4,972 withheld from their paycheck and paid to the government by you on their behalf. Okay, well, if we make them an independent contractor and you pay them the same $65,000, now you pay zero Medicare and Social Security tax for them. So you instantly save $5,000 in taxes. You pay them directly $65,000. That's counted as revenue for them. Then they're allowed to take expenses on that. They might take a vehicle expense, they might take an office expense, they might take their cell phone as an expense, they might be providing some tools, whatever those may be, whether it's a real construction site and they're providing their own tools that way, or if it's an office type job and they buy their own computer, whatever it might be, those would all be expenses. So if we say, okay, well, let's just assume that they can come up with about $30,000 of expenses. That's usually pretty easy to do for any size of business. You take a vehicle, you take office expenses, a home office deduction, and you take some computer and office supplies or some other tools, and you come up to about $30,000 of expenses pretty quickly. So that means if they made $65,000 in revenue, we subtract out that $30,000 of expenses, their bottom line is $35,000. Well, they are going to get hit with self-employment tax, or uh, there's other things that we could do, but just to keep it simple, we'll assume that they are getting hit with self-employment tax and they're staying a sole proprietorship. So $35,000 times by 0.153 for 15.3% is now 53.55. So they're going to pay, just in that scenario, they pay about $1,300 more in Medicare and Social Security tax. However, they're now paying probably $2,000 or $3,000 less in income taxes because they were able to take expenses on those too. So they're going to actually save approximately $2,000 in cash outflow through less taxes. The other thing they can do is then they could become an S corporation. And again, you should be talking to they need to talk to their tax advisor. But personally, the way I define reasonable and fair wages, their Medicare and Social Security tax would have been all but zero. Pretty darn close to zero with the way I typically handle an S corporation at that level. So they would have saved by doing that, by having a $65,000 employee changing him to an independent contractor, you as the business owner would have saved about $5,000 in taxes, and the employee contractor would have actually saved about seven or $8,000 in taxes. At a $65,000 pay scale. That's significant. That's a lot of money at that level. Well, there are restrictions to calling somebody an independent contractor. They actually have to meet the rules. And I've opened up the websites. We'll go look at those here in just a second. But generally, the rule comes down to the amount of control you can assert over somebody. In typical business law, now there's a whole bunch of labor laws out there that change things, but in typical business law, employee-employer relationship is actually very closely related to indentured servitude. That as long as the employer's not having the employee do something completely illegal, the employee is actually required to obey and do it, and they are compensated for that through wages. Again, there's a whole bunch of different labor laws that come into play there, but ultimately, when it really comes down to it, the basic rule is you're pretty much an indentured servant as an employee when working for an employer. So let's talk about control. Well, how do you have control over somebody? Well, if it's an actual employer-employee relationship, you're providing them with a place to work. You are providing all their tools for them. You're telling them when and where to work. You're telling them what to work on. Yeah, you're telling them the standard of that work. You're giving them permission if they can take time off or not. All those things are control that you can assert over an employee that you may or may not be able to assert over a contractor. Um, and so let's go ahead and share screen and we'll look at some of the rules on this. Um, okay, so this first website I have pulled up is the actual IRS.gov website. And up until recently, there was about a 20-factor test that you could test for independent contractor versus employee. And I'm actually going to still show that because it is still relevant today and it is still used in court cases. However, the actual rules have changed to more of a interpretive rule. So now it's more of how much control do you assert and what are the facts and circumstances versus here's the actual 20 factors that you're testing. So you could actually really go outside of the 20 factor test and still win somebody being an independent contractor. But if you have any questions, this is definitely one of the best places to go. The IRS's direct website about what is an independent contractor. So just make sure you're looking at the irs.gov website when you do a Google search for this. But basically what it comes down to is we've got some common law rules, remote worker rules, but really what we talk about in here is control and how, what might you be claiming in order to say that you have control or you don't have control. And I'll get more into that here in a second, but let's come in. This is an older version of what was the 20 factor or the 20 common law factors of employee versus independent contractor. So this is getting harder and harder to actually find merely because the rules have changed, even though this factor test is still used. But things like, are you instructing your employees? Are you training your employees? Are they integrated? Services rendered personally, hiring, supervising, paying, continuing relationships, set hours of work, other jobs, locations, order of work, interim reports, payments, expenses, materials, investments, profit and loss, all these things. So, this is something you can look at to help determine if you could potentially make somebody an independent contractor versus an employee. So these are a couple of resources that you can have. This one is you just Google the 20 common law factors for employee versus independent contractor. All right, so what's Jason's personal preference on this or Jason's recommendations that he gives to clients? So typically I tell somebody, okay, most single member LLCs with a typically one employee being yourself, and then you might have a few people helping you. This is really falling into kind of the work from home, remote worker type mentality. So you might have what are called VAs or virtual assistants. You might have some people within the United States performing some services for you, and some people outside the United States performing some services for you. So what it really comes down to is how much control, like I said, can you assert over them? Well, if somebody's working from home and they're providing their own computer, they're probably setting their own hours. So if they're setting their own hours, they're providing their own computer, that's their own tools, then they pretty much meet some factors of what right there being called an independent contractor. Now you could make it a little better by actually have them sign a contract. But again, how much control is that contract going to assert over them? So if you're going to say, well, I provide the computer for my all my staff because, that's one of the benefits that I offer. I buy the computer for them. Well, then what other thing are you going to do for them to allow them to still be a contractor? So if I'm providing the computer, do I tell them, hey, it's okay if you go out and get third-party work? I really don't care. I'm not going to say who or what you can work on. It's your business. You can go find other clients to do work for. Now, just like if I was a home builder, if I'm a general contractor and I hire a roofing company to come in and put a roof on, I'm going to tell them I want a roof done at a certain date. In order to meet the completion timeline of this build project, I need the roof done by X date, but it also has to be started by, X date because that's when the other projects, that's when the framing's up or the siding or whatever, right? Like there's certain things that have to be in place before the roof can get started, and then the roof has to be done by a certain time in order for us to continue forward on the construction project to meet our deadline. So I'm going to have some time restrictions on that roofer. Uh, and that's fine, but that roofer can come in, put on the roof, but I'm not going to tell them no, they can't go work for anybody else, so it's the same concept. If I am telling somebody when and where to work, I'm providing them this is when I need it done by, and I'm providing them the tools. Well, then, yeah, the concession is I don't care if you go get other work, but if you don't get my work done, then you're not my contractor anymore. Just like if I was the house builder and some guy just blows me off and doesn't put in the roof, I'm going to be like, well, I'm never using them again. So same concepts there. So if you don't provide the computer and they're providing their own computer, well, they're providing their own tools. That's an expense for them. They're a contractor. If you are telling them when and where to work and what to work on, then they provide their own computer. They set their own. They can take on third-party work. Or if you're going to say no third-party work, then you might want to say, well, you know what? As long as the work gets done, I don't care when you do it or when you take vacation, as long as the work's done by X due dates. That's another way to give them flexibility. So as long as you work out some way to take or to assert less control over your staff, the more you're going to be able to make that argument that they are in fact independent contractors. Now, with COVID a few years ago, everybody wants to work from home and be remote workers. There has been some crackdown on what is considered an independent contractor. Again, it comes back to being able to establish the fact pattern, the facts and circumstances, and ultimately, it's very easy to win that anybody working from home is an independent contractor because you don't have eyes on them all the time saying, oh yeah, they're definitely at their computer working. Like there's some software restrictions you can put in and different things that monitor stuff like that. But it's really easy to call somebody an independent contractor when they work from home. So just keep that in mind. And hopefully this video helps you better understand an employee versus an independent contractor, why an independent contractor is better tax-wise for both you as the employer and the person working for you as an independent contractor, and how to make sure that you are going to be capable, if it comes under question, that you can make the claim they are in fact an independent contractor. Okay. Have a wonderful weekend.